Uptown Girls is a comedy that came out in 2003 that stars Dakota Fanning and Brittany Murphy. And I know all of y'all watching this are probably wondering, why the hell are you reviewing Uptown Girls? Well, for one, the main reason is the fact that it's a $50 Patreon request from no other than Tyree. Dude has been loyal for so long, and I appreciate every single one of his requests, including this one. And I know a lot of y'all are probably going to say that I'm being dishonest by saying this, but I was actually kind of excited for this movie. And I'll tell you why. Early 2000s cinema is something that I find incredibly comfortable and cozy. I was born in 1994, which means that the late 90s and the early 2000s are where all of my childhood memories took place. And obviously I grew up with a lot of 2000s cinema. And obviously, even though the early 2000s churned out a lot of poo-poo, I still find it very cozy and just very warm and approachable. Whether it be movies like The Mummy Returned or the Scooby-Doo live-action movie, both those movies are technically fucking terrible, but I love them to death and I've seen them more times than I can remember. And what's even crazier is that Uptown Girls actually turned out to be a pretty good movie. And I swear to you, it's not just my 2000s nostalgia bias that made me ease up on this movie. I think that this film is legitimately a pretty good movie. And honestly, I don't blame anybody for sleeping on this movie or just avoiding it entirely. Because, I mean, obviously I did. I mean, growing up, I knew this movie existed, but I didn't watch it because I'm a young boy and anything that even remotely resembled chick flick, I just fucking avoided like the plague. But again, I get it. The title of this movie, Uptown Girls, and the concept of it all, it's a hard sell. Because at the end of the day, who really wants to see a movie portray the struggles of rich white girls? But this film actually does conquer an uphill battle, which is make me actually care about these rich white girls. But I'll dive more into how this film actually accomplishes that a little bit later. First, I want to talk about something that is actually quite shocking about this movie. This movie had no business being as well shot and as well directed as it was. I'm telling you, the cinematography in this movie is shockingly good. And I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that, oh yeah, it's shot as good as like an Andrei Tarkovsky or Stanley Kubrick film or anything like that. But within the standard of a romantic comedy or a dramedy, however you want to categorize it, it's actually shot really well and presented in a pretty impressive way. And the reason why this film is as well shot as it is because it was shot by Michael Ballhaus. I think that's how you pronounce that. I'm not sure. He also did a cinematography for a handful of Scorsese films, including The Last Temptation of Christ, The Age of Innocence, and Goodfellas. And he also was a cinematographer for Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is directed by Francis Ford Coppola. And as you know, all those films are incredibly well shot. And I'm not saying Uptown Girls is as well shot as those films, obviously, but you can tell that there is a lot of talent and a lot of intention behind the camera there. There's a good chunk of scenes and shots in this movie where you can tell they took a lot of time to think about the way that the scene was going to be framed to reflect the current context of the movie. And there's also a good handful of creative transitions that, again, didn't have to be there for this kind of movie, but they're there, and I'm gonna admire it when I see it. So even if you watch this movie based on my recommendation and don't end up liking it, at least you can look forward to a well-shot film. But there's other important reasons to why I feel like this film worked quite well. The first one being the chemistry and the casting of Brittany Murphy and Dakota Fanning. I think that both of these actresses worked incredibly well together. They're both full of personality and they're both incredibly charming. And I just loved seeing their dynamic and just seeing their character growth as the film progresses. And yes, foundationally speaking, it does have the cliche opposites attract trope that we've seen in a billion movies up to this point. But to be fair, I do think that this film does do a great job at exploring each of their own characters and showcasing to the audience how exactly they became the way they are. Because Brittany Murphy's character is a grown-ass woman that's living off of her dead parents' inheritance. Even though she's an adult, she's incredibly playful and childlike and immature. And, all she does is go out and party and just frivolously buy a bunch of shit for no reason. And, Dakota Fanning's character, the reason why they're opposite is because even though she's a little girl, she's incredibly strict, incredibly disciplined, incredibly mature. But what I really think was a great writing choice, in my opinion, was what they share thematically. Because thematically speaking, they're both dealing with the absence of parents, and they're both dealing with elements of grief. As I mentioned, Brittany Murphy's parents, they're both, long gone and dead. And Dakota Fanning, her dad is essentially in a coma, and she's just convinced that he's going to die any day. And her mother just completely neglects her. Like, she pays no attention to her. She hires people to take care of her as she goes out and, kind of like whores herself out to the next best musician that's out there. And I found it quite compelling how this film illustrates how they both are dealing with grief and trauma in their own different way. Both of their extended versions of the personalities are really just coping mechanisms for the stuff that they've had a hard time dealing with in their life. And again, is it the most original and refreshing material on earth? No, but it's layered enough for me to give a shit. And in terms of performances, again, both Dakota Fanning and Brittany Murphy are so great. Brittany Murphy is just a joy to watch on screen. It was wonderful to see her in a movie because I haven't seen her on screen in a very, very long time. Rest in peace, Brittany Murphy. As far as the behind the scenes stuff that I've seen her in and the interviews that involved her, I feel like she really did come off as a genuine and just adorable and wholesome person. And it's just really sad that we didn't get to see her continue to flourish and progress with her acting career. And obviously, as well as Dakota Fanning, she kills it in this movie. And again, she has to act like a very mature adult woman, even though she's only a kid, which is kind of weird, considering the content, because this film is portraying a child character that is being forced to grow up way too fast and act like an adult, which is a reflection of Dakota Fanning's real life, where she was kind of forced to grow up a lot quicker because of the childhood stardom. And there is this one romantic angle in this movie revolving around this one, obviously, male character. And at first I was like, oh shit, here we go. This is going to be cringe over 9,000. But I mean, luckily this film cuts right to the chase and portrays him as a complete douchebag. And he's just that way pretty much the entire movie. So in a way, he's kind of just sidelined. And it really made me think that they probably just incorporated this male romantic figure, if you want to even call him that in this movie, to, at the time, put him in the trailers and market it to their target audience. Because to me, he doesn't really serve that much purpose in this movie. And with that being said, I didn't really particularly enjoy the ending to this movie, mostly because of the fact that it revolves around the romantic figure, the love interest, if you even want to call him that. And they try to redeem him at the very end with something that he does. And it just seems like, it seems like really forced. And he does a lot of irredeemable shit in this movie. He steals her creative ideas and gets inspiration from her without even crediting her at all. And it just seems just from a flip of a switch, oh, we're supposed to just care about him now. But really the biggest criticism that I have to give this movie, and it's a pretty big criticism, is the fact that in terms of narrative and plot, it is literally nothing new. Everything about this movie in terms of the flow, it just hits every predictable beat that you would guess from it. It doesn't do anything really subversive. It's by the numbers, the same plot line that you would expect out of a movie like this. There's no surprises. And also there's plenty of lines of dialogue, whether it be narration or actual dialogue from the characters, that are just very on the nose stuff, just spoon feeding messages and themes or plot information to the audience. That again, I really hate shit like that. But again, for what this film is, it was quite surprising how enjoyable, how funny, how wholesome everything actually was. And again, I felt genuine emotion in this movie. I mean, I didn't cry or anything, but I felt something. So I'm going to give Uptown Girls a soft to solid 7 out of 10. Just a really quick, superficial criticism. The song Uptown Girls from Billy Joel was not used at all this entire movie. And I just think that was a huge flop. I mean, I understand that maybe it's just too obvious to use it, or maybe they didn't have the money. But I mean, at least in the end credits or something, damn. But anyways, that's all I got to say about Uptown Girls. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the film, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.